and will not have a part of it. Now, you will always fill your pews by telling people what they want to hear. It's the basic rule in churches. You know, it's what Rick Warren basically is talking about. He says, find out a group of people who are ill-served, find out what they want to hear, and go and tell it to them. If you read a purpose-driven church, that's pretty much what he's saying. He also says a lot of very good things. Please, Mr. Warren, I have a lot of respect for you. In the unlikely event that you are watching YouTube at the moment, I have a lot of respect for you at times. But he is basically saying, you go out and you find a group of people and you pour warm water into their ears. And after a couple of years of pouring warm water into their ears, they'll flock to the church, and that certainly happened. That certainly happened. And yet I go back and I start reading St. Paul's letters, his pastoral epistles. I read the letters that he wrote to the early churches at a time when Christianity must have looked like it was clinging on by the skin of its teeth. And none of them poured warm water into people's ears. They called out what was wrong.
Right.
They called out what was wicked and poisonous, what undermined that new church. And if St. Paul had never done it, Christianity would have gone the way of Mithraism and Gnosticism and every other creed that never lived up to its expectations.
That's right.
The only reason Christianity survived, and sometimes in the last couple of centuries I wonder how it has survived, is because it was frequently true to its principles. Early Christianity was criticized for being full of slaves, domestic servants, and homosexuals. That wasn't the exact word that was used, but it was something similar. This was a criticism of the early church. St. Paul was more worried about the mean-spiritedness of not sharing with other members of the community. St. Paul was more worried that the church that was developing had begun to look like something other than Jesus Christ's ministry. St. Paul was not concerned with getting everybody in through an open door with cheap grace, free grace, the sort of grace that isn't worth having, the sort of grace that requires no examination, no transformation, the sort of grace that is terrified to use words like sin, because we don't use that in MCC. I do. And anyone who honestly believes that they do not have any burden of sin or brokenness, of fallenness in their life, is perhaps lacking that facility of self-examination, which brings us to God. Now that's different to covering ourselves in sackcloth and ashes and creeping to the cross. There'll be an opportunity to do that when we start our 12:15 Mass. But until then, thank you, Nanny. There you go, love that, Nanny, honestly. But at the moment, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the real deliverance, the real salvation that comes from seeing the truth. It's no salvation to believe you're something that you're not. It's no salvation to look back on your life and see something that never happened. It's no salvation to look into the future and be in a mystical dream world. The salvation comes from looking at your life, pointing at it, describing it, transforming it and elevating it and lifting it up into the presence of God. Amen. Not suppression, but transformation. Now I say again to you, all those occasions where that transformation has come to me, it has come through other people, and usually when they have irritated the hell out of me. It is our life in community that changes us. It is our experience of things which we wouldn't choose, which change us. That's the whole point of it. If we only get the things we choose, we remain the same as we were when we first started to choose. And in human beings, that's about 3 years old. If we are never opened up to any experiences other than those which we are familiar with and comfortable with, we will never be anything more than we were before. Amen. A lot of people are worried sick that now increasingly, as people live less and less in the centre of cities where you are forced to live next to people who are different to you, they move to suburbs where everyone thinks the same, and increasingly where everyone looks the same. Right. I should know I live in Harrowhead. I'm not joking, my goodness, it's scary out there. Now, many of you did warn me before I moved out there. And it seemed like a good idea It seemed like a good idea at the time, but dear, oh dear, oh dear. So I'm happy to say that on the 1st of December, Leon and I are moving to the Bywater. Piety Street, no less. Which means that we might actually be able to be out of an evening and out and about and at events more often. Because believe you me, after work here, when you get back to Harrahan, you don't want to go outside again. Partly because it means passing through Harrahan, but mostly because you're exhausted. It's about time to end up. You know, the whole sermon is really about the ability of us to live in community. The community we have here, a community of difference, and I'm going to say something else which is profoundly unpopular. Please wait until afterwards if you're going to throw something at me. But you know, to an awful lot of people who are Caucasian, they think that appropriate behaviour for African American folk is behaving just like a Caucasian. And that any symptom of cultural inheritance is just misbehaving. It's just being different. It's just being awkward. Just being bloody-minded. And the only reason they do it is to try and make good Caucasian people feel uncomfortable. Now, I can tell you after years of study, I'll let you into a secret, that's not true. It's not true. In the same way that Caucasian people do not spend all their time being as starchy as possible to make African American people feel uncomfortable when they come into church. Now, I know that may seem personal and uncalled for, but it does seem to me that there seems to be a little misunderstanding. That it is all right to be diverse if you're really all the same. It's all right. It's all right to be gay as long as you look straight. If you're flaming, well, oh dear, that's embarrassing. We don't want him around us. If you're a drag queen, oh, why do they do it? You know? If you're transgender, just no idea about that. Faintest idea. And if you're black, as I say, and speak with any sort of an accent at all, then, oh, God help you there. You're just going right off. The truth is that all my experience as a human being, as a pastor, and as a Christian has brought me to believe that we are shockingly alike. Shockingly alike. And this doesn't just pertain to within one country. This goes way beyond. Your average person from whatever background, in England, wherever, wants approximately the same things as your average person in Sri Lanka, though they may be Buddhist, or your average person in America. Which is why Christianity, with its transcendent light of the world, has had universal appeal all over the world. Because we are not that different. It is the same God that shines in front of each and every one of us. Amen. How many people here have been to an MCC General Conference before? Well, I can tell you, the chance to go there is a chance to be in community, not only with ourselves, but also with the Fellowship, which is a group of churches headed by Bishop Yvette Flander. And we are now going to be in communion together. Bishop Yvette Flander has taken MCC credentials, and Nancy Wilson has now taken fellowship credentials. And we're going to have a joint conference next year in Acapulco. And I am going to be there, and Leon is going to be there, and whoever the lay delegate is from this church is going to be there, and hopefully several more of you are going to be there. And you know, your eyes are going to be open to lots of different ways of expressing your love for Christianity. And it should be able to be done in the same room, Amen. No matter how many hundred people are there. Amen. There will be praise and worship music. Yes. There will be gospel music. Yes. There will be classical church music. There will be traditional hymns. And they will all be rubbing along.